Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Jazz or V, whatever you like to call me. And today we will be talking about all the books I read in November. Yay! So time for my November wrap up. Today is the day that my Spotify Wrapped was released. I've listened to so much music. It's actually insane. I've listened to 42,000 minutes, and of those 42,000, 30,000 were ATs. Yeah. And I also used the Spotify audiobook feature. So I've listened to 7 books this year. For me, I have to say it's difficult for me to just commit to Spotify because of the 12-hour limit. So if I have an audiobook that's longer, then I just can't finish it in 1 month. That's kind of crazy. So yeah, so much to that. I'm wondering, how did your Wrap go? Do you even have Spotify Wrapped? That's something you do. I always find it interesting. As a fan of a music group, it's kind of dear to my heart, but then also I do listen to a lot of music. I can't live without music. In other news, I'm also going to Vienna tomorrow, which is why I'm trying to prepare this video as fast as I can, that I can leave because I won't be back until like Monday, and on Monday I will upload. Let's see how this will go. Maybe this video will be a little too late. Anyways, without further yapping, let's get into the books I read in November. Now, I've read 7 books last month, and I don't think I would rate any of them 5 stars if I think about it right now. But I've read some really good books, and I mainly read short stories, actually. It's kind of funny, kind of ended up like that. Short stories or essays, but there's also some other books in there. Anyways, let's get started. So the first book I read in November was Murderbot Diary number 3, Rogue Protocol by Marta Wells. Now, I can't say too much. Obviously, it's the 3rd book in the series, so if I talk too much about it, it's kind of a spoiler. But generally, these book series, they follow Murderbot. It's a bot that is originally a killer bot, but hacked its own government module, and now is kind of a rogue bot, but spends most of its time watching the media stream, so entertainment. Murderbot is on a mission for itself, not because someone contracted it, and it just kind of has like things it wants to do. And for me, book 3, I must say, the supporting cast, I didn't like as much as I did in book 1 and 2. Book 2 had amazing supporting cast. I loved the cast of book 2. And now in book 3, I found the humans Murderbot encountered, or also the other bot Murderbot encountered, were just not as interesting to me. So I kind of wasn't drawn in that much. And I also felt the story because of that, because the first 2 books I felt were very character driven. Because of that, the 3rd book as well, the plot was not, for me, not engaging enough to really be like locked in and find it amazing. However, obviously I will continue. I think Murderbot is an amazing series. I think it's very fun. It's very chill to just listen to if you just need something to laugh about and just to relax a bit. It's a perfect read, and I listened to it as an audiobook, and I listened to the full cast version, so it's with sound effects and with different people who are talking, and I really like that. I think it's very enjoyable. It gives a whole new dimension to a story like that, so I enjoyed it a lot. I'm looking forward to what comes next. I feel now the plot is like moving in a way that could be interesting, and I know there's one novella and then there's an actual full-length novel coming next, so I'm kind of excited. I don't know yet when I will continue, but I'll definitely continue that. I've rated this book, this 3rd book, 3 stars because it was an okay read for me. Then the 2nd book I read is Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen. It's a graphic novel, so here you can see. And yeah, I read that in like half an hour, so it's really short. It's a short read. It's easy to read because it's a graphic novel, and it's not necessarily an adult graphic novel, but I do think it is like anyone can read this book. And it was kind of like my autumnal read. I saw it in the bookshop and was like, okay, let me get it, because I've heard so many people recommend it for October, and now, you know, it's November and it's still fall. So I was like, okay, I want to give this a go, and I really enjoyed it. It was really cute, and the art style is amazing. I love this artist's art style. I think she does amazing art, and the story was really like heartwarming and sweet. It's about a garlic who has anxiety and is tasked to go into the abandoned mansion in the forest because there is a vampire living there, and the job for Garlic is to scare off the vampire, because obviously vampires are scared of garlics, you know. And obviously our garlic is very afraid, and I felt this book was a very nice take on like self-empowerment, gaining confidence, and I really liked how anxiety was portrayed. It felt really authentic. It felt very much, as someone who has experienced anxiety, it felt as like something I could relate to a lot, and I just found it very sweet and very healing. And I think it would be a great book to read with maybe children or teenagers to kind of like look at these kind of like confidence stuff. And yeah, I think it's a really good read and very accessible. So I gave it 4 stars. Good art, good story, cozy. There was not much happening. The stakes are not high in this book. It's kind of just a comfortable, cozy little read. So yeah, that's Garlic and the Vampire. Next up, I've read Antarctica by Claire Keegan. Antarctica is a short story collection by Claire Keegan. Claire Keegan is the same author who wrote Small Things Like These. Amazing book. I loved it a lot. I think about it a lot, like so often. Really very touching. Read it. That's a recommendation. Read Small Things Like These. Short read as well. So it's 15 short stories. I listened to them as an audiobook. Definitely the center of all 15 stories is the female experience, or it's like the experience of being a woman. And it's not necessarily always told from a woman's point of view, because the point of view, there's also men as our protagonists, but it always centers around a woman, the impact of a woman on someone's life. And I really liked how it shows many different aspects. It shows also like the situations about different generations and how they deal with each other and social expectations. But then also the first few stories are actually like tackling cheating. I find that very interesting as well. Like, why would you cheat on a partner? Like, what are the motives to like kind of break that promise you made and go into something new or something different? Or also, what is it like to be the second woman in a man's life? So he is married and you are the affair. Like this kind of exploration. And it's definitely also about women's wrongs. So it's not just about women's rights. You know, the saying that I support women's wrongs. This book is definitely not supposed to make you support them. It's very much supposed to show you how people can do bad things and how bad things are kind of, they never exist in isolation, and how there's always reasons for why we do what we do, but that doesn't justify what we are doing. So I really thought these stories were very insightful. I felt they were very touching. Some are in my head still. And yeah, the whole mood, the whole vibe was very, you know, foggy November, I would say. It wasn't happy. It wasn't upbeat. It was more a bit like, okay. Some stories were hard to listen to. There's also some trigger warnings that are given. Appreciate that a lot. One thing also to mention, the audiobook actually has multiple narrators, and I really enjoyed that because the narrator kind of changes depending on whose point of view the story is by. So if the story is by a man, the narrator is actually a man as well. Gives it another dimension, and I thought it was really nice, these different people, to hear different voices and not just hear from A to Z by the same voice. I gave this book Antarctica 4 stars. I think it's a really, it's a tough read, but I feel it's very beautifully executed. Claire Keegan really has a way with words that makes you engaged and that makes you feel for those people, and even in just short stories. And I also found it interesting how none of the short stories actually have an ending. They're all very open-ended. They kind of just stop. And that's also very interesting. So you kind of are left with your thoughts and you don't quite know sometimes where to put those thoughts. So next up, I read the book Physically. I read Miss Kim Knows and Other Stories by Nam-Joo. Now, I don't have the book, as you can tell, because I actually got the book from a friend and I read it. It belongs to her, so I lent it from her and I actually gave it to her today. I didn't think about that. I still wanted to film. I see her once a week, so I could have waited a week. But yeah, so I don't have the book now. That was a book I read physically. And as the title already says, and other stories, it's again a short story collection. Are we sensing a theme? Who knows what I like? I like short story collections. Woo! Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the author, this is the same author who wrote Kim Ji-young, born 1982. It's a very popular novel from Korea, and she is a popular Korean author. And I was really happy to read her short stories because I felt they actually brought another dimension to discrimination of women in Korea. Now, that's kind of the main thing so far that I've read from her. So Kim Ji-young is also about that. And when I read Kim Ji-young, it very much was a relatable story because everything that happens to Kim Ji-young, it happens to every person who's socialized female. That is kind of how it is. Like if you're socialized a woman, if you're AFAB, that's kind of like you encounter these things. It's not that strange, even though Korea is far away from where I live. Now, with Miss Kim Knows and other stories, I felt it was way more about the Korean everyday experience and very Korea specific. It was so much about familial structures, about generations, about mothers and grandmothers and daughters, and how all of them kind of have to break free from certain structures or are freed from certain structures and oppressions, and it was very touching for me as well. It was intense to read like how even young girls are treated in certain situations versus young boys, or how injustices that happen to girls are treated by society as a whole, or are seen by like, you know, other parents or your neighbor or whatever. It's very interesting, and I really liked how it was so centered around women who kind of want to break free from what is the norm, but struggle so much with it because it's the norm. And I think that is a very Korea typical thing, because if you look at what you see from the press from Korea, the society is not aligned on social justice issues regarding women, and that kind of is very polarizing. How this is written, I really felt like you could feel how polarizing it is and how contrasting these views are, and I really like how this was written. Nam-Joo has a way with words that is very dry, but it really gets you to the point. It's like she does not put a filter on what she wants to say. So that's also something you kind of like go into, and I really enjoy her prose. And I think personally, if you're interested in Korean feminism and also discrimination in Korea, I recommend this book over Kim Ji-young, because I feel Kim Ji-young was the global experience and Miss Kim Knows and Other Stories is the Korean experience. So if that's something you're interested in, read those stories. I felt they were very wide plethora of representation and of situations. It felt very much as a view on Korean society more than on just discrimination as a whole. So I rate this book 4 stars because I don't think it's for everyone. I really enjoyed it. Another kind of hard read. It was not as heavy as Antarctica, I have to be honest, but it was still, you know, it's dealing with things, and but it felt freeing in a way, and I'm really glad that this book is out there, and I feel that's something people should be reading. So, of course, there was still a book left over from October that I have to read, and that was Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett. Woo! My first Discworld novel. Equal Rites is about a girl called Ekaterina. I love her name, actually. I think her name is amazing. Or just called Esk, and Esk was predicted to be the 7th son of a 7th son, and thus she was supposed to be a wizard. Unfortunately, she was not a son but a daughter. However, that didn't matter. She was still predicted to be a wizard, so that's what happens. And the thing is, in the Discworld, women are not wizards. Women are witches. They're not wizards. Wizards, you know, there's like this segregation of the gender. So Esk is like a person that shouldn't be existing, or like the person, yes, but her skills are not supposed to be existing. And that kind of causes some issues. And it kind of goes that, you know, her family is not really addressing it, or they're trying not to address it because, you know, maybe magic is not manifesting. However, of course, the magic is manifesting, and we follow Esk on a journey on going and finding a place where she can study to become a wizard. Now, for me, I've had some grimes with this book. So generally, I really enjoyed the book. I think the world is fun, the storytelling is fun, but the plot, I'm sorry, but I just expected more. I thought we will get to the magic school and then like experience magical school things. However, the whole book is just centered around the journey, and I felt something was missing. I wish I would have had more. So yeah, for me that was kind of a letdown in this case, because I was just reading and I was like, okay, but when are we getting to our destination so we can like learn magic? And that just didn't happen. I was a little disappointed there, but I do have to say it is a fun story, and I'd be interested in reading more Discworld novels. I feel the world is very cool. The world building is done very nicely, very subtly. It's mentioned that there are things, and I feel, because I mean there's like 44 novels or something like that, there must be so much more about this world and every corner of the world. And I know that the Equal Rights book is the first book of the Witches series within the universe, and the Witches series has 3 books. So I don't know if I want to just look into the Witches series first or what I should do. And Equal Rights officially is the 3rd book of the entire series, so at least I didn't start with like 31 or something. So yeah, and I've read it on my e-reader, and I'm rating this book 3 stars because I felt a little let down. And like, it took me so long to read it, and for what? I was like, oh! Alright, next up we are coming to the 2 last books I read this month, and both of them are essays. So the first one I read was by my queen, Octavia E. Butler. It's A Few Rules for Predicting the Future. That's an essay by her. So in this book, it's only that essay. It's a very short book, a very quick read, and I don't have that much to say about it because it is that short. However, I do feel it's a great introduction. I don't know if it's the right word. If you read this, you understand her works better. That's what I will say. Or like her thought process. I genuinely really love to read about Octavia and how she thought and how she lived, because she's, as a person, is very interesting to me as well. This essay it's witty in a way because it starts with a conversation between her and a student. Like, she was asked, maybe I can read you the beginning. So, do you really believe that in the future we're going to have the kind of trouble you write about in your books? Was the question she was asked. And then she kind of talks about how she gave an answer to that, and then the answer wasn't really written in the like newspaper that was released, and then she kind of goes on to answer that question, and also answers why she thinks it's important to predict the future, why we should, or as writers, why it's important to give maybe dystopian future as a written text, because it also acts as a warning to what we're doing now might be dangerous in the future. And I thought it was very insightful, and I'm really looking forward to reading her books next year. So that was kind of a December read to then start off with a novel of hers again in January. And yeah, it's a very short essay, so I really don't have much to say. I think I would give it like 4 stars, but I'm not sure if I want to rate it at all. Since it's an essay, I enjoyed that, reading that. It was a very short read. And then finally, we come to the last book I've read in November. Can we even call it a book? So I've read... It's called Fascism and Democracy by George Orwell, but it's a Penguin essay collection, and it's 5 essays. So one is Fascism and Democracy, obviously, then Literature and Totalitarianism, Freedom of the Park, Review of the Invasion from Mars, and finally Visions of a Totalitarian Future. So it's really just, you see this? It's not even bound. It's just, tackered together. And, well, I thought, is there a better time in life to read George Orwell's essay than in 2025? I'm not sure right now, in my life at least. And I have things to say. I would like to talk about every single essay on here. Let me just look at my notes real quick. Just maybe like first some general things I need to say. First off, all of these essays were written during World War II, which means we kind of have to keep that in mind when we're reading these, that is the situation we're dealing with. So that also greatly affected his views on things in the way of how he thinks the world will evolve, because obviously it wasn't sure what will happen with the world, because there was a war in mainland Europe and Orwell was in the UK. So, how do you deal with that? Then another thing that I just noticed throughout that, Orwell is definitely a doomsayer. So he does not think the future is bright. Maybe he's right, who knows? But he's definitely someone who says it's all going downhill soon, TM. But at the same time, he says he hopes there will be a socialist future, but also he does not speak kindly and positively of the future. Something I wondered while reading was like, what would Orwell write today with the world changed? That's kind of, interesting as well. Anyways, I would like to start with the essay I liked the most, and that essay is his review on The Invasion from Mars. Now, why did I like it so much? So basically, if you don't know, The Invasion from Mars was a radio show, or a radio program, maybe we would call it a one-time radio program, released in 1938, and it was kind of a reimagination of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. I didn't hear the radio show, and I didn't read The War of the Worlds, but I just generally know what it's about. That radio show was released like a news report, and there was a phenomenon following it that many people thought, like, we are being invaded by aliens. They believed that. And Orwell's essay kind of tackles this whole people not questioning what they hear whatsoever. And I find that so interesting because he wrote that in a time where we did not have social media. Fake news, like we know it today, was not something that he could have ever imagined happening. And I found it so interesting how already then, that's 80 years ago, even more, it was in 40 where he wrote this essay. 85 years ago, he said like 1/3 of the people who heard this radio show panicked and just believed the aliens are here. That's crazy. And it really reminded me of like how people these days just believe anything. Like how things just, misinformation is just spread and it's just believed. And I thought it was, the parallels were, to me, were so striking. And it kind of shows, we talk about fake news and how it's dangerous, etc., but we also need to talk about media literacy and questioning things, verifying your sources. Like, especially today where we have the internet, you can find multiple sources on one thing. You can do that. You can research. You don't have to believe the first source. And I think that is a very big takeaway I take from that essay, that's just, it's maybe in certain human nature to just believe whatever is being said, even if it's clearly crazy. But yeah, it kind of just shows how, yeah, people just believe things. And yeah, so that was my favorite essay. It kind of made me think a lot. And then the other essay I really enjoyed a lot was Visions of a Totalitarian Future, because I think that was the birth of 1984. And I like 1984 a lot. I love this book. I think about it a lot. It lives in my head rent-free. And there were word-for-word quotes that are in 1984. Like the 2 + 2 is 5. He wrote that in that essay. And I was just reading that. I was like, oh my God, this is the beginning. That's when he came up with the novel. And it's very much in this essay as like, if we look at it as the base of 1984, you could see the parallels. You could see how whatever he painted in this essay, he put into 1984. He was like, okay, and now we are writing it into reality. And I love that. So I really enjoyed that essay simply for that reason. Obviously, he said some good things, as he usually does. Actually marked quite a bit. It's very much about how do we know something is true? How can we make sure that history is not being changed? Obviously, if you read 1984, you know what's up there. And how can we make sure that future generations will have the correct history after we've dealt with a regime that changed history? And he kind of goes on from the Spanish War. He was there on active duty, and he kind of talks about the things he saw there and how facts were just like clearly false information was being spread by the people in power, and how you know, information just disappears if the people in power decide that it disappears. And so that's the 2 + 2 is 5. If the person in power says 2 + 2 is 5, then that is the truth, because we're removing the fact and the base and the knowledge and the history behind 2 + 2 is 4. And I think that is mind-blowing, scary, and if you read 1984, you'll get it. That's like literally what he writes about in 1984. So I love that essay simply for that. Then Freedom of the Park is about free speech, the social standard of free speech, and free speech only existing as long as it's socially acceptable. It's very interesting, and also freedom of the press as well. And also one thing I thought was very interesting that he had was about the fact that if a government changes, so let's say we go from a right-wing government to a left-wing government, not everyone who's working in the system changes. So for example, just because your government is now left-wing and a law maybe changes to a more, is softened or whatever, that doesn't mean that every single person working in the system is now suddenly also aligned with that. And he specifically starts with an example of policemen. And I thought that was interesting because policemen are the law enforcers, But if things change, how can you like make sure as a government that ideologies are, you know, kind of removed, especially after a long time of certain ideologies being prominent? And you can't. That's also a big point. You can't guarantee that unless you get rid of every person. And that's also kind of an issue that you have to deal with, especially when you go through big changes. Like, how do you make sure the system changes with it? And then also, does society actually even change just because the government changed? So that's kind of an interesting take there as well. And then, like, from literature and totalitarianism, there's like just one key takeaway, or two actually. Book banning is horrible, but you know, you knew that already if you're on booktube. You knew that. And the second thing is the death of literature is the death of free speech. And I agree. If we can't write anymore what we want to write, then we will not be able to say what we want to say. But also ideas, they stay alive. And there's nothing more powerful than writing down your ideas for future generations to read them. And I'm glad he actually did that by writing those essays. And then actually my least favorite one of the bunch is Fascism and Democracy, because I just don't agree with him. I don't agree with George Orwell, and it's just how it is, because he says mediocre democracy should be supported because, you know, it's still better than fascism. And that's why we shouldn't work against mediocre democracy, because that means we're cutting off the branch we're sitting on. And I'm sorry, Mr. Orwell, I do think we have to fight mediocre democracy, because mediocre democracy is feeding into right-wing propaganda and fascism, and I am not here for that. So I think we need to push for actual democracy and, you know, go against the mediocre democracy. Do not settle for mediocrity. Please, you do not have to settle for that. Work to make it better. That is worth it. So yeah. Whoa, I talked a lot about these essays, but that, you see how he impacts me? Damn, this person. I need to read more of his essays. That was my review of this essay collection. I think you should read them, all 5 of them. I think they're interesting. Fascism and Democracy, you can read it to disagree with him. Maybe you agree with him, who knows, but I don't. Anyways, so this was the last book. I'm done. I talked a lot about that one. So 7 books in November. We'll see how many we'll get in December. What was your favorite book you read in November? Let me know in the comments. I think my favorite to read, oh, this is hard. Maybe it was the essays. No, it wasn't. Oh, it's hard. Maybe Miss Kim knows. Yeah. Was it? Okay, maybe I can't choose. Who's surprised? I can never choose. So I'm not choosing a favorite, because Antarctica was really good as well. So I kind of have 3 that I really like. So we've reached the end of the video. So what can I say is like, subscribe if you haven't already. I know most of you have, but if you haven't, you gotta subscribe now. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss an update from me. That is it from me. The next video, I'm not sure yet what it's gonna be. We'll see. Since I'm going to Vienna, my life is kind of upside down and I'm late on everything, but I'll do fine. And until then, I wish you a wonderful time. I see you next time. Have a good one. Have a nice December. It's the last month of the year. Enjoy it and see you soon. Bye.